In this CineGuru MAX tutorial, we're going to take a look at how you can tell your cameras what to point at using focal points. So this simple scene contains 3 barrels, and what we're going to do is drop in a camera marker, and what I want to do is get it to point at the red barrel. So I could drop my camera marker in, let's just move it up a little bit, and I could start using the widget or the sliders here to sort of position the camera, kind of tweak the yaw and the pitch, but it's a little imprecise. It can be quite time consuming, and I'm not totally sure that the framing's right on that. So I'm going to show you an alternative method that works a lot better, and that's using focal points. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to turn our camera completely 180 degrees away from our object and move it over here. So if we go back into Add Level Objects, I'm going to drag out a focal point. These have had a little bit of a redesign since CineGuru Classic. They now look like a sort of a 3D crosshair, and all of these cones are pointing towards a single point in 3D space. If you now draw a visual logic connection between your camera and your focal point, what you're basically saying is when this camera is activated, point at wherever this kind of crosshair is pointing to, point at this point in 3D space. So you can use this to kind of, get your camera pointing at very specific points on an object or in a scene. So this little sticker here that says flammable, maybe we want the camera to point at that. Maybe that's a really crucial bit of information that we need to kind of show the player. So I'm going to position our focal point over that sticker. So now when the camera's activated, it'll point at that sticker. Just move it a little bit closer, and I might even zoom it in a little bit just so you can see exactly where we're pointing. So it's a 5-second shot, and we're going to be pointing directly at this sticker that says flammable. Just to complete the cinematic, we will add in a Cine trigger zone to fire everything off, and we'll draw a connection between the zone and the camera. So as the player enters the zone, the camera will be triggered, and it will look at the focal point, which is over that sticker. So there we go. We're looking, and you can see the sticker is directly in the center of frame. And if I zoom the camera in more, or maybe if I got the camera a bit closer, if I kind of moved it to here, then it really would be kind of pointing directly where we wanted it to be, like that. So all pretty straightforward so far, and this works with moving cameras too. So for instance, if I wanted to add in an endpoint and have like a simple sort of A to B move, it'll work for that too. So again, I've just dropped in a camera endpoint, and if I just draw a connection between our camera marker and our endpoint, our film time, I think, on our camera marker is 5 seconds. So it'll take 5 seconds to move from this position to that position, but the whole time it's going to be looking at this sticker on the barrel. So we'll just show that. And you can see we've kept that sticker as like the center of our shot. It's in the center of frame. Okay, so all pretty straightforward so far. Let's take a look at the focal point in more detail. So you can see that it's got one editable parameter. It too has a film time parameter. So a little bit like with camera markers, how you can kind of build up complicated paths that they can follow using camera nodes, you can string focal points together to create what I like to call a path of focus. So you can move the focus from, let's say, this sticker to this barrel, or even to this one. So I'll show you how you do that now. So let's drop in another focal point, and we'll put this one on this blue barrel over here. And if I just draw a connection between I'm going to move this focal point out so I can select it more easily. If I draw a connection between this focal point and this focal point, what I'm basically saying is when this camera is activated, it's immediately going to look at this focal point. But it's going to start sort of moving the focus over to this focal point. And it's going to take 5 seconds to do it. 5 seconds is the film time. If it were to take, let's say, 3 seconds to do it, then it'll kind of get there before the end of the shot. And so the camera will just sort of stay focused on that focal point for the remainder of the shot. So just to show that that's, I'll delete that endpoint to start with and just show you that how that works in practice. So immediately as the camera was activated, we transitioned our focus over to the blue barrel. It took us 2 seconds to get there, and then for the remainder of the shot we stayed looking at the 3 seconds to get there, and then we stayed looking at this focal point for the last 2 seconds. We can add another focal point as well over on this green barrel, and again I'm going to sort of move these around a little bit to make them a little bit easier to select. And I think I'll make our shot longer as well so you can really see this in action. So we've already specified it takes 3 seconds to move the focus from the sticker on the red barrel to the blue barrel. If it now takes, let's say, 4 seconds to move from this focal point to the next one in the sequence, which is this one over here, this green barrel, then I'm going to need a shot that's a little bit longer. So let's make it a 7-second shot. So it'll take 3 seconds to go from the red barrel to the blue barrel, and 4 seconds to go from the blue barrel to the green barrel. So immediately we go and have a look at the blue barrel, and then there's quite a nice little sort of smooth transition into the next move. And so this way you can start building up some interesting camera moves. This is another way that you can do sort of pans and tilts and things by moving these markers around and not having just to rely on the position and orientation of your camera marker and endpoint marker. And of course this also works with moving shots as well. So keep in mind that the whole time we've been doing this, our camera markers are not even pointed anywhere near our focal points. But because they're connected using the visual logic system, it's, you know, they know to look at them straight away. So here the camera is going to move from this position to this position, and while it's doing it, it's going to start by looking at the red barrel, the sticker, and then it's going to look over to the blue barrel, and then it's going to come back and it's going to look at the green barrel. Okay, so pretty cool. But perhaps there's a more sort of professional way we can make this look, a better way we can do it. So what I've got over here is an example where I've got this goblet on a table and I've got a police officer. And what I want to do is create a shot where the camera is kind of moving around these two, and it starts by focusing on the goblet. The goblet's very important. And then sort of halfway through the shot, I want it to sort of transition the focus over to the police officer. And I want it to kind of hang on the police officer for a little bit. So I want it to start on the goblet and hang there for maybe 3 seconds, then move and kind of hang on the police officer for a further, let's say, 3 seconds. So let's build this up from scratch. So we'll start by just making the camera move. So we'll drop in a camera marker. Let's make this a 10-second shot. And we will make the focal length 60 throughout. And we'll drop in an endpoint marker over here. And let's actually just raise both of these elements up a little bit so they're actually above the table. That's really going to help. Okay, so they're kind of, might be quite nice to have it at sort of table level actually. So if I were to take a look at what this looks like, let's just drop in a Cine trigger zone over here, and we want the Cine trigger zone to activate this camera, and this camera to then go to this endpoint. Pop in a bit of sand so I can find it in test game. At the moment, no focal points attached, so the move is literally just going to go from one side to the other. We're actually below the level of the table, so I might want to increase the height of both of those markers. But you can see that it's quite a slow shot, and what we want to do is have the goblet as the focus for the first few seconds. Let's just move those up. Like that. That should be above the level of the table now. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop in 4 focal points, and we're going to move them around after we've linked them together. So at the moment I'm just going to drop in 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to sort of tweak each one. So let's create a path of focus. So from our camera marker, I'm going to draw a connection out to the first focal point, and then I'm going to draw connections between all the other focal points. So we've now got like a continuous line of focus. So first focal point, really what I want to do is I want to place that kind of on the goblet, because that's where I want our sort of shot to start. I'm probably going to raise it up a little bit, kind of have it maybe about here. And if we go into the behaviors, I know it's a 10-second shot. The film time by default is set to 5. I don't really want to take 5 seconds to get to the next focal point. I really just want to maybe do 3. So I'll perhaps even, no, let's go. Yeah, let's stick with 3. That's fine. That's fine. So 3 seconds to get to the next focal point, which is this one down here. But if we now move this focal point up and we put it in basically the same position as our previous focal point, and I'm just going to rotate it by 45 degrees so you can see which one we're actually working with. What I'm effectively saying is, okay, it takes 3 seconds to get from here to here, which is, you know, basically next door. So really the focus will essentially stay in the same place for those 3 seconds. Once it gets to that second focal point, we then want to instruct it, okay, I don't want to look at the goblet anymore, I want to go up to the police officer. So I want that transition to take 4 seconds. So it's going to take 4 seconds to get from here up to our next focal point, which we're actually going to place next to the police officer. So let's raise that up a little bit. Now the film time on this focal point is 5 seconds. So we could just place our other focal point here if we wanted to, next to the previous one in the sequence, because that will last out the end of the shot. That will outlast the end of the shot. So there we go. So we've now built a little sequence where the focus for this camera starts on the goblet. It moves from focal point 1 to focal point 2, which are basically in the same position. By the time it gets to about here, it'll transition up to the police officer, focal point 3, and then focal point 4 is again basically in the same position. So let's take a look at how that looks. Might need to tweak it a little bit, but we'll see. There's our goblet, and then we pan to the police officer. And actually, you know what? That's not bad. That's pretty good. I mean, potentially I might want to add a little zoom in on the end because we are getting a bit far away from the police officer by the end of the shot. But otherwise, I mean, I think that's not bad. So this is a kind of a more complicated example, but you can see how it really gives it some sort of cinematic weight by being able to kind of keep certain things in focus and then move that focus to something else within the scene. And it really lends it a nice kind of cinematic quality. So that's how you can use focal points to tell your camera what to point at. But there are other ways that you can tell your camera what to point at, which we'll cover in the next tutorial. So I'll see you then.